Today's guest is a powerhouse in and out of the kitchen. Kimberly Parris, also known as Kimi Michelle, is a chef, creative strategist, and a cultural advocate whose work centers Black-owned food businesses and the deeper stories behind what we eat. In this episode, we talk about the world of dining culture, the heavy expectations placed on service professionals, and the emotional toll of trying to meet those expectations and demands while also balancing motherhood and real life. Kimberly's story is one of reclamation, purpose, and passion, and a reminder that healing and hospitality often go hand in hand. Here's what's really going on behind the service. When are you coming home? Okay, welcome, Miss Kimi Michelle.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. One, you being a fellow hospitality professional. Two, you being in the food and beverage side of the hospitality industry. Three, you being a beautiful Black woman immersed in culture and fashion and history and just so many things. Business entrepreneurship. Like, you have so many assets and facets and just all these things to you that I'm so excited to bring here.
Oh,
Because
thank you.
yes, ma'am, of course. I want to start by, so I know that your brand is Kimi Michelle.
Yes.
Um, could you please just tell us what Kimi Michelle is about, what your brand is, what it is that you do, and what it is that you want to mean to the world and your consumers?
So, Kimmy Michelle is me, right? My name is actually Kimberly Michelle. Most people call me Kimmy because eventually we become friends, or at the very least friendly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that feeling of coming home is the biggest part of hospitality. The
Mhm.
idea that when you go to an establishment, whether this establishment's a restaurant or a hotel, that you are taking home with you and going to a new home and wanting to feel comfortable and safe in that space. And that's at the core of what I do, and recreating that sense of home in these different food and beverage and hospitality spaces. So I am a restaurant consultant. I'm
Mhm.
also a professional chef. I've been a professional chef for 15 years. And I've really, there's been a lot of shifts along the way. There's been a lot of pivots along the way, but there's also been a lot of joy and a lot of creativity
Yeah.
along the way. And I'm really grateful for a 15-year career.
Oh my.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what the next 15 years look like. Hopefully
I'm
somewhere
excited.
retired on a beach someplace.
I know
But
that's right.
okay.
With somebody serving you good food.
I know that's right.
Yes,
Please,
ma'am.
absolutely feed me.
Um, and so before I dive into more of what your brand is about, because from what I've researched, it goes beyond food, right? You use food to connect the world to something so much more, so much deeper. I won't say more important, but so much deeper. And so before we dive into that, I do want to ask, just to get a little bit more detail about your brand. What style of cooking do you do? I know food and beverage looks so different. What is it, um what style of consultancy and restaurants do you typically assist?
So the restaurants I like to assist primarily are restaurants for people that look like us. I feel very strongly about supporting Black owned businesses, supporting Black owned companies, working with Black owned restaurants.
Mhm.
I feel as if we, as a group, as a whole, we embody what community looks like. And because we embody what community looks like, oftentimes people envy that community, so they do whatever they can to disrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to Black owned restaurants in particular, something that I typically hear a lot of, there's always some form of caveat. One thing I hear sometimes, I wanted to support you because you're, but, and it's always the but that takes me aback, because these other restaurants, they don't get that caveat. There
Mm-hmm.
is no but. Like, I mean, McDonald's, you get your order wrong 10 times and you go back to McDonald's every single time.
Cold,
So,
nasty, machines
you know,
broken.
the McFlurry machine ain't had McFlurry since 2016, but you go back every time,
Every time.
and I mean, that's obviously a generalization, but the premise is that we have to, even amongst ourselves, we have to do above and beyond to receive the even the modicum of the same level of support. And so for me, amplifying and working with these businesses so that they can meet not just the standard of our community, but just to get themselves to to a gold standard, period, where it's them being the Black owned business is not the calling sign, but it just happens to be this wonderful business that is also Black owned.
Mm-hmm.
That is the goal. That's what I do. That is who I primarily work with as a consultant. As a chef, I got my start doing what I like to call French inspired Caribbean cuisine, because I'm
Okay,
classically
nice.
French trained. Because I'm classically French trained. My family's from the Caribbean. My mother's from Barbados. My father's from Trinidad.
Nice.
So I have a strong Caribbean influence, but Caribbean food is not my primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
I actually tend to focus a lot more on elevated cuisines. I do a lot of Italian food. I've loved Italian food all my life. Um, I actually grew through the ranks in Italian cuisine. In some spaces, I again love French inspired cuisine because I was classically French trained. I love Asian foods, all Asian foods, specifically Korean and Vietnamese. I feel like their sense of community and family mirrors the Black community's sense of
Nice.
family. And, I love the stories that are told when I encounter those foods, those businesses. There's this account I follow, the Korean Vegan, and she's a lawyer who transitioned to being a full time cookbook author, and she tells the most beautiful stories of interconnectivity and family and community. And I find that oftentimes those stories mirror our own of resilience and love and family. And because food means so much to me, because food tells its own story, those are the
Mm-hmm.
types of foods I tend to lean towards.
I love that. I love one everything you just said, but to hear you compare the cultures through food and our relationships through food and family, compare Black communities with Korean communities. That was very insightful to me. While I don't doubt it at all, I'm generally aware of many foreign cultures and other groups of people, especially many just melanated people in general, because at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, we all started together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but many melanated groups in general having similarities with us, but quite often you see us comparing like Latin communities, and it's much more prominent to see those groups act like us, do a lot of the things that we do, and so it's easier to, or it's more common for me to hear, you know, those groups being compared to us. But to hear about Korean cultures, that was really insightful. I'm also like I love Asian food. I do. I love Asian
Yeah.
food. I am of Caribbean descent. My dad's from Glenville, Jamaica, and
Oh, okay,
so
nice.
Montego Bay. But my mom's from Dawson, Georgia. So I got good food on both sides. I got good
Right. Wonderful.
homegrown Southern food, and then I
And
have
it's
Caribbean
listen,
food.
and Southern food has its own stories too. Like I think, you know, we're in such a time right now where everyone's on edge, and understandably so. Right? I think there's no denying that. And I always one of the things I've always maintained is that food is its own language. And food is a connector regardless, and while food may not necessarily transcend everything we're currently going through, the reality of it is that food has always connected. It's always, think southern hospitality, setting the family table, going to Big Mama's house to sit at the table, everyone sitting together, passing the plates of food, sharing the plates of food. Going back to Korean culture, they eat similarly. They so traditionally in Korean style foods, when you go to eat, like if you've ever been to Korean barbecue or any Korean restaurant, they
Mm-hmm.
have tiny small bowls of different condiments and different. There's a oh my goodness, the word is on the tip of my tongue. There's a specific name for this, but so you might find kimchi in one bowl, you
Yeah.
might find fish cakes in one bowl, you might find spinach in one bowl, vegetables in one, bean curd, um, maybe different types of rice, maybe Korean cheese corn. And the idea is that you commune together and each of you takes,
Yeah.
the elder eats first, and then you take different bits of food from each of the bowls to create the plate for the elder and then create the plate for yourselves. So it's that same prevailing thread of community that is in many of these cultures, and it's why I'm so appreciative of it. And while some of these same cultures we also struggle with, in sense of, you know again, I've mentioned before, we have a people have a tendency to crave community, and sometimes if they lack community, they just try to take from something that's already existing as opposed to creating their own.
Yeah.
And so, while I do recognize, like, there are many cultural vultures out there, and those cultural vultures exist in every race, I think that the resounding thread of food and community for the people who get it
Mm-hmm.
is it works perfectly. And it's whether you're Southern or Caribbean or African or Korean.
I I'm so excited to edit and post this episode. I'm excited because while this platform has several purposes, um, one of them is just to highlight how impactful and important hospitality is. And the reason why I say that is because being a hospitality major, like I went to school for hospitality. When you go to school
Mm-hmm.
for law, or you go to school to be a doctor, or
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I don't think hospitality was fully understood by my peers or by my family. Even my husband, when I met him and I told him I graduated from school to go, hospitality. Um, he's like, "Can you even get a degree in that? What is that?"
Yeah.
And how impactful is that? And it is in so many ways, right? But to hear you talk about how important it is, just culturally, spiritually, emotionally, to people, just to eat something as basic as eating or sharing a plate, is so impactful and has been in existence for so long for a
Mm-hmm.
reason, right? It builds
Mm-hmm.
community, it keeps community. Even
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about families. I mean, when a neighbor comes into town, when a stranger enters your safe space, you bring them food to welcome them and say hi. Food is just like a hug, or like before you even hug
Mm-hmm.
somebody, you probably bring them a basket first. When they accept the basket, then you hug them. Now you know you're okay.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so,
Even if someone passes on, same thing.
yeah.
To the repast, you bring food. That's your community hug.
Hmm.
It's your joining in time of sorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. I I don't consider myself a foodie, but I've always loved food. And amongst my sisters, I've always been really big on like cooking and playing with things. Like even as a child, they would like send me into the kitchen and say, Courtney, make an hors d'oeuvre. And I would just come up with stuff because I had so much fun. One of my favorite movies growing up was Ratatouille because I'm like, oh my God. I remember like the scene where he had the cheese and the strawberry and he bit them both and like tasted the combination of flavors. I went into my fridge as a child. We had Jamaican cheese that we bought from the store and we had green grapes from Publix. And I ate them together and was like, ah! But the feeling,
I
the
love
excitement,
that.
yes, ma'am. And I still do that. Like for Mother's Day, uh, I threw a Mother's Day brunch and I enjoyed like just creating a spread of things for my family to come. And like
Right.
I'm the person that wants to hear like, oh, this is so good. And I'm like, with unprompted, like all you have to say is good, and I'm immediately like, so this is how I made it. And so I I love to hear a professional like you be able to connect and explain exactly how important it is, because me just saying I love it, I love it, I like it just sounds like I'm greedy, right? And so
No, but I get where you're going.
yeah, but to have someone to put factual context to it and to be able to explain it so eloquently like you, I enjoy that. I'm glad that you're able to do that on my platform so I can share with people like everyone from professional chefs like Miss Kimi Michelle all the way down to your restaurant cooks that are in the back. Like, please understand, like, cooking is a part of people's nature. It's a part of their hospitality. It's a way that they give. Even my husband, he is known to be very stoic. He is not very lovey personality wise, right? A lot of people think he's not. Then you get to know him and like even his nieces. I remember meeting his nieces and they're like, "You like Uncle Paul?" It's so funny. And I'm like, no, he's really sweet. Like he's never mean. He's just really stoic. But one of the ways he really shows like love. He's a cook. He will get on a grill in a minute. And like
Hmm.
for Valentine's Day, I have two baby girls. And so we have two baby girls. For Valentine's Day, he prepared a spread of things. And that was like all of that on the table was his love just right there. And he spent like 2 days planning it. He went to different stores to get specific ingredients. He spent the entire day prepping it, the entire night prepping
Love
it, the next
that.
morning like he did his own thing. He's like he made a homemade chimichurri and lobster and steaks and asparagus. He even made shrimp and he's allergic to it. And so
Oh.
yes, ma'am, that really excites me. Could you tell me what other than going into restaurants and consulting with them and cooking, what is it that the Kimi Michelle brand does for do you have any other extracurricular activities that you do that you feel that gives back to the cause that you're trying to give to?
So before I started consulting full time, I built a couple of sub brands, and one was called Cutery. So Cutery started off as a snack box that
Yeah,
specifically highlighted and featured black owned or woman of color owned businesses in the
love that.
box. And I used to interview the founders so I can get their story, get their why. And that was a lot of fun because you were able to follow the thread of you know not feeling seen, not feeling heard, forging your own path in the midst of you know adversity, or in the midst of that's just a girl, or
Yeah.
that's just a black girl, or whatever, or that's just a woman of color, whoever. And so that was something that I did. And then that brand evolved into an app that would feature black owned restaurants and farmers and introduce them to the community. I did a lot of fundraising for that, and some of it was successful, but the majority of it wasn't. again, one of the unfortunate things about the time we're in currently is there is an attack on us just being who we are,
Mm-hmm.
on us just existing in our skin. And, you know, when you're not the one who holds the purse, sometimes that results in you having to get creative to move these projects forward. But also to historically, the other side of hospitality that we tend to not discuss is like self hospitality, because it's very easy in the hospitality industry to give your all to care for
Yeah.
others, to put forth for others. And so, in this process of trying to build this brand, to bring community, to bring forward the hospitality industry more, to connect farmers and food and the community together, at some point I said, you have to take care of yourself right now, Kim. Um, you know, you are fighting so hard to care for everyone else, and you have to take care of yourself. So I took a step back from doing that
Mm-hmm.
to do just that, to take care of myself. And in that process, I reconnected with loving food again, with cooking for myself again. We get getting creative again, merging different cultures and showing how they interconnect again. So that's a big part of the brand in general. And you will see a thread of not just self reflection, but self love in the brand, in my own personal brand, because I think it's something we don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
Um, e- Excuse me. And then outside of that, I'm an avid dancer.
Nice.
Um, I used to dance semi professionally when I was in school. I was a dance minor in college. So every chance I get, if I can find a dance class,
Yeah.
I'm in there.
What type of dance?
Um, I actually have always loved jazz,
Mm-hmm.
modern. Like I've always loved modern. It's something about like the free flow and
Yeah.
the interpretation and like I love hip hop. I've done hip hop, but jazz and modern have always come naturally to me. It's something about the way that the emotions are interpreted in the movement that I think speak to me more.
Do you feel that there is a connection in any way, whether it's the way you feel when you're doing both, or the way that they've impacted you through your life? Do you feel that there's any connection between dancing and food, whether that's cooking, eating?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I do actually. So I when I dance, and it's so funny because when I was in prayer a couple of days ago, they were like, "You gotta start dancing again," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right." Um, when I dance, I when I truly just dance, when I'm not focused on the choreography
Yeah,
or the specific move, there is this opening that happens. Everything like elongates in me. There is just a true joy in the movement. I feel free.
nice.
I would say the same thing exists when I focus less on the recipe and focus on what the ancestors put in me
Hmm.
and just cook from the heart.
I love
It's
that.
the same feeling.
I
It's the same.
love that.
Thank
And you
you.
say, I know it's like trending right now, so I try not to like bring up everything that's trending, but you say the ancestors and you're talking about food and dance. So I'm assuming you've seen Sinners.
Of course I have. Twice.
And
Twice.
that's just what came to mind. Just,
Oh, okay.
seeing you
Yeah.
cook and probably seeing people the same way, kind of how they have the scene where he's singing and
And
everyone's dancing,
everyone,
and then the ancestors of the
yes,
future and past are doing the same thing.
yes,
I can
yes.
see that like existing in the kitchen as well. Even
It
even in
does.
church when we're praying and speaking in tongues, our
Yeah,
ancestors doing the similar things, or whenever we're,
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that I don't know. That was really cool to hear you say
Absolutely.
that. And I
Oh,
was
thank you.
thinking it as you said it, and then you said what the ancestors put in me, and I'm like, shoot, we here. Okay.
We here. We here.
um Okay. And so I know earlier you said, there's been some trials and tribulations and there's been some amazing things, right, throughout your journey. And as I stated before, behind the service, amongst its many purposes, really started as a way for me to like finally let it all out, right? I was in hospitality, or I'm still in hospitality, but I was in specifically operations leadership in lodging, hotels, resorts, things like that, timeshare. Um, and I had crazy, crazy, crazy experiences. I mean, Miss Kimi Michelle, I mean, team members, hostile team members. I have had people threatening to fight me or follow me to my car to the employee parking lot while pregnant. Like I've had to I've had situations where I've been cursed out by staff or cursed out by guests. But I've also had way more impactful situations where I have cried with guests. I have hugged and held staff. I have gone home and prayed for these people when I'm praying for my family. I spent a lot of time. A part of a big chunk of my life is hospitality and what I did for hotels with my teams, things like that. And so being in a professional industry, especially working for organizations and brands, you don't have a space to talk about this. You really don't. Maybe if you really have like a decent or understanding HR director, you can come in and address things. But not to say I didn't have a decent HR director, but a lot of the brands and organizations I worked for, I didn't really have an HR director on site. And anyway, it just wasn't a space for me to talk about it. Couldn't talk to your employees about it. That's they're your subordinates, and then you can't, that's
Right.
fraternization. You can't talk to your bosses, that's fraternization. You go home, can't talk to your husband really because he really don't understand. Like y'all are
Yeah.
cleaning rooms in the
You would have
hotel.
to do
Like,
more explaining to just get him to get it. And that's how
yeah. And
you don't want
so
to tell more.
yeah. And so that's what this is, right? That's where this started.
Okay.
Like, oh my goodness, all the stories I have, I can start a podcast about it. And if I have all these stories in my little time of being in there, I know several people. I've managed hundreds of people, like multiple states, multiple brands, multiple people. I worked in a part of the industry where turnover was high. So I've met
Mm-hmm.
and interviewed and hired and trained and fired hundreds. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean hundreds of people in the last 6 years. And all of these people that I've met and just interacted with, amongst them, they've been in the industry and had several other experiences too. And I'm like, this could be like the rest of our lives talking about this. And hospitality is the largest industry because it encompasses so many parts and
Mm-hmm.
so everything, right? And so I want to kind of dive into like what were some of the I don't know, some of the most impactful moments you've had, whether that is tear jerking, whether it was joyful, inspirational, or whether it really just pissed you off and things got on your nerve and you felt like I really need to share this story so that people who visit restaurants or so that people who eat food or that people who come into contact with my part of the industry know how to act when they show up, right? Um, Anything that you want to share, I would love to hear it.
So I have two stories. Um, I'll start with the one that took me a while to heal from,
Mhm.
and then I'll start with the one that was the most impactful. I'll end with the one that was most impactful. So when I and I've told this story before, because I had a podcast as well for a while, and I told the story, parts of it during the podcast, and I've talked about it a little bit. I didn't name this place in depth because for the most part I had an NDA. NDA is expired, so but I'm still, I don't really have a
Yeah.
desire to shout them out because it's from a different time. But those who know, they know. Like
Mhm.
they know. I don't really have to. I probably don't have to say where it was, but there the when I was at the height of my professional chef career, there's this thing in the industry specifically where we tend to seek validation, especially as chefs. And a lot of times, chefs are really hard on each other when you tell your journey, where you tell what part of the journey you're from. Like, oh, what kind of chef are you? And home chefs, home cooks are often treated differently than catering chefs, like people who've created their own businesses, who are also treated differently than folks who maybe do fast casual dining, who work in a supermarket, or who actually work in restaurants.
Yeah.
So my goal was always to be a restaurant chef. I didn't start off as a restaurant chef. I actually started off running my own business. And then I pivoted, after a couple of years because, when you're running your own business, I'm sure funds can be a challenge. And at the time, my daughter was 5, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, I still had to feed her. I still had to clothe her.
Yeah.
I still have to house her. Um, so I had transitioned to working for Whole Foods,
Mhm.
and I worked my way up the ladder there. And that was a wonderful experience. In fact, I would say that was probably the most wonderful of all of my chef experiences working for Whole Foods at that time.
I love Hove.
Yeah. These were pre Amazon days though. So
Yeah.
just, I say that. But I say all that to say, when I got this job as a sous chef for like a really major restaurant group in the country, and it was my favorite style of cooking, I was elated. Like I was like this is the dream. This is the dream, right? And two things happened there, and I remember them distinctly. So, um, you're. Let me take my ring off. It's probably gonna be hard to see on camera, but there is a light spot on. I don't even know where the camera is on this thing. This is the camera here. Um, if you can see, like
I
there's a
can see
little
that.
light spot here,
Yes,
and it
ma'am.
looks like discoloration, but in essence, it's the healing of a third-degree burn that I got. Now, like I said, I've been working in restaurants for a very, very long time. I've never ever badly injured myself. I got burnt one time at Whole Foods. Someone didn't say they didn't they didn't communicate properly, and they
Mhm.
bumped into me with a hot tray,
Yeah.
and it hit me
Oh,
here. It healed easily. Um, that was once. The other time was in this case. Now, in this case, similar things happened. Um, I was reaching up into the salamander, which is a heavy industrial strength broiler that's above, as opposed to like underneath the
mhm.
oven, to pull out a dish, and the dish had butter and cheese in it, lots of butter, lots of cheese. And one of the line cooks went under me to open the oven without saying
Mhm.
anything.
Yeah.
And so when she came back out from underneath, she jostled me, and the butter poured on my hand.
Goodness.
So I was out for 3 weeks from that. And I remember, because this is my dominant hand, I'm right handed.
Mhm.
So I was just kind of like, oh my God, my career is over. What am I going to do? But the thing that stood out to me more was, and this is part of the unfortunate parts of the industry, I was like mentally messed up, right? Because I had just started the job at the
Yeah.
time. So I was really like messed up about it in all sorts of ways. Plus my hand really hurt. It was healing, and so like they told me, they were like, listen, if you can find some place to sit and work there, you can do that, but you need to stay away from the kitchen. especially because my inclination is always to go jump on the line and help. So like I could have stood on expo and I could have just expoed, but I know myself well enough to know I'm gonna go to try to go take something. I'm gonna go to try to do something. I'm gonna infect this hand, and this hand needs to heal. Like it was
Yeah.
completely bandaged. So I stayed, I stayed home. But more to the point, the fact that I felt like I had to justify after getting second and third degree burns, like why I needed to stay home to heal the hand, that kind of stood out for me. And like there's this culture, sometimes there's a culture in restaurants where you just kind of the war stories are the important part. The idea that you work 17 hours, 18, oh I did 20 hours, and like there's a pride in there in that. And I like if I mentioned before, I talked about self-help and self-care, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like if you follow Anthony Bourdain, who was one of my all-time favorite chefs, and I cried when he passed. And he's in his book Kitchen Confidential, he talks about the toxic side of the industry where you're literally self-medicating with drugs and alcohol just to stay sane and do those 20-hour shifts and those 22-hour shifts. And while it might make for great stories, is it necessarily healthy? No. Right? So what stood out in that instance, even after I healed, was the shift in how I was dealt with as a chef, as if I didn't know what I was doing, even though it wasn't even my fault to begin with. Right? So that was the first thing. Um, Fast forward, there was a concerted effort to get me out of that restaurant because I come from I have a strong operations background. I have a strong structural background. And one of the biggest things I'm good at doing is creating structure in places that don't have any. And at the time, they had none. When I say they had none, they had none. And a lot of people didn't like that. It made them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
My presence made them uncomfortable. In fact, I remember one line cook said, "You're a little scary." And I said, "Well, can you tell me what made me scary?" Because I said the same thing this chef said, in the same manner that this chef said. The only difference between this chef and that chef is that I'm black and they're not. So what makes me scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those experiences stuck with me, and it took a long time to heal from them, because just imagine that your very existence just living in your skin is scary to them, and you're just doing your job,
Yeah.
right? When I became a restaurant consultant, I started working with this restaurant, and there was this incident where the two people at the bar, they started arguing over something silly, and I had to physically break the fight up. It's two grown men, mind you. One, when I say hopped over the bar, I mean hopped over the bar,
I believe
and
you.
and I'm just sitting here like, here I am. I'm all of 5'2", okay, 5'2" and a half if we're gonna get technical, right? And I am breaking up a fight between someone who I know is in their 50s and someone who I know is in their 60s, and I'm just like, this is like, I don't get paid enough for this. But the
Right?
thing that stood out, and even though I mean, like I'm paid well as a consultant, I still don't get paid
Still
enough for
not
this.
enough of that.
Right. But the thing that the thing that stood out was the after. So after, because I had to call the police to get him out of there, the aggressor. Afterwards, I was touching tables, making sure everyone was okay.
Mhm.
I had to offer a drink to the table that was impacted by the guy who hopped over the table, over the bar. Um, there was a table of three black women in the corner, and I, everything's okay. Are you guys okay? Thank you so much. I really apologize for all of that. You know, that's not the norm here, etc., etc. And they stopped me, and she took my hand, and she goes, "We're okay. Are you okay?" And, you know, I talk about community, like that right there is community. I didn't know any of those women. It was the first time I had met them. It was the first time they had walked into that space. And they immediately said, "You have fixed everyone else. Can we hug you? Because you need it right now." And of course, I burst into copious amounts of tears because I was just like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not okay. I even because you're just going. You know, when you're in fix it mode, you're just going. And it was just such a powerful moment, and it reminded me why I choose the places I choose to help, because you have moments like that.
I resonated with you in so many ways. uh the kitchen is a crazy place alone. Like, you can walk past the kitchen, and like you said, like, people weren't calling out correctly. You walk past the kitchen, if you've just even been near a professional kitchen, you hear
Mm-hmm.
behind, corner, hot,
Mm-hmm.
like you hear those
Below,
terms.
above,
Yeah, you even start using them sometimes yourself,
at
like being in a
home.
heart of house in a hotel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even in food and beverage, but I know, my husband is cook. Sometimes I find myself, if he in the kitchen or I'm in the kitchen and I got something hot and I'm about to go to the sink with it or vice versa, I'm like, behind, hot, hot, like, watch out.
And
And
you yell
so,
that hot, and you scream that hot at the top of your lungs, hot.
yeah.
Like, move.
To hear you say, like, that guilt of the pride in working so much, and then the guilt of, like, not being able to, work so hard because you have to take care of yourself. I felt guilt every maternity leave. I'm there with my baby. I just met her, like, I've been carrying her. She's been kicking me. We were cleaning together in the hotel, and I just met her, and I'm holding her, and I find myself shifting between being so, like, caught up in how beautiful she is, and then thinking about the hotel and my team and how much I'm gonna need to catch up on when I get back, and is everybody doing okay? And
Yep.
and
Yep.
when I get back, will there be significant amount of, especially being a department lead, like, it's my department. So, like, did I leave everything in its place so that when I get back I can pick up where we left off, or are people running around, um and are they struggling without me? And if they are struggling without me, how will I have to pay for it when I get back?
Mm-hmm. You
And so
start
it was a
making a
lot of that
mental list. You start making a
yeah, it was a
mental
lot of that
list in
going on
your
in my
head.
head. I will say my most previous GM was the most supportive general manager I've ever had.
That's good.
She, was amazing, super sweet, always checking on my well-being. But when I decided to resign, there was a moment that which I wish I could, talk to her about it, but we haven't spoken since. We're not on bad terms, but I was at a point of, like, defeat. I had been working 60, 70, 80 plus hour weeks from the time I got into hospitality before she even met me up until the time that I left. And
Mm-hmm.
I was proud of it. While I was working there, I felt appreciated, but I remember being gone for that week and not specifying to everyone while I was gone, obviously, because my business is my business. The only person that may need to know is my boss. But I remember walking in, and our valet manager, the first thing he said to me as soon as I walked in through the doors, he was like, "Are you coming here to quit?" And that hurt my feelings because I'm like, why would that be a thought? I've never even said I wanted to quit. Like that. Why would that? And I go for a week and I come back. So what are the talks? What that just kind of shows, like, what is the image of you having to leave for any reason? To take care of yourself because life happened, because, like,
Mm-hmm.
the moment that you can't show up for the industry is the moment that, unfortunately, our culture in that industry is like, good no more. And that is like, it's a hurtful feeling. I would love to ask you, what is your vision for where you feel like the industry, hospitality in general, needs to go? What are some changes or things or new things that you are excited for or want to see in the future?
I think the biggest thing I would love to see is definitely a bigger focus on ourselves, to find a better balance, a better work life balance for our employees. You know, both of us just told stories of exactly that, which is, you know, the guilt that we feel around doing things that we need to do for ourselves, putting so much, excuse me, out for everyone else but ourselves. I would love to see more collaborations, cross cultural collaborations. I feel like we're really in need of community, and I feel like doing more things in the community will help bridge a lot of those gaps. Um, and I just want to see more of us just channeling what we love in this community, in this industry, and being out there. I've been seeing so many younger people really bridging the gap and getting out there, and I love that. And I would love to see more mentorship.
I think that would be really cool to kind of have. You know how you created a space for Black business owners in food and beverage to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
connect with like farmers and things like that. That would really be cool for us to have a space where hospitality professionals could connect. Yeah, no, mentorship, that's very important, especially in our industry because it's constantly growing and changing, and it's going to always be like interconnected in everybody's lives. But we do not have to struggle. It's such a beautiful industry. Why are we so tired and angry?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Miss Kimberly Parris, is there anything else that you have on your heart or mind to share to the audience, or anything that you want to leave us with before we conclude?
Lean into community. However you do, lean into community. That's gonna be the key. That's the key. Yeah, that's what I
Thank
got.
you. Thank you. Lean into community. I'm gonna put it up on the screen in quotations when I say that, when you say it. Well,
Oh,
thank you so much, Miss Kimmy Michelle, for
thank
your
you. Thank you
voice.
for having me. This was
Of
wonderful.
course. Thank you. I will be sharing your links to your website and some information about you, the information you sent me. It will be in the description of the episodes on all of the
Awesome.
platforms. So for all of my viewers and
Yay.
listeners, please be sure to click on the links to follow and learn more about Miss Kimmy Michelle and her beautiful brand. When are you coming home?